Okay, let's talk about the internet layer protocols now. And we have IPv4 and IPv6. IP standing for Internet Protocol, and it's used for routing and for addressing. So as we know, IPv4 and 6 in and of itself doesn't have the ability to verify message accuracy. TCP will handle that, okay, the connection-oriented communication. However, IPv4 and v6 have a little bit of a differentiation in how they handle security. IPv4 has no security built in. IPv6 has IPsec or IP security built in. All right, so one other thing to understand is the difference in the address itself. IPv4 is a 32-bit address, whereas IPv6 is a 128-bit address, so exponentially larger than IPv4. With IPv4, we have roughly 4.2 billion IP addresses. And as we know, that's not enough for every person on the planet, not to mention the Internet of Things and all the different devices that everyone has, the connected homes, and so on and so forth. So we've done some things like NAT and address aggregation and so forth to kind of narrow that down and to keep IPv4 as a viable platform. But eventually we're going to run out of IPv4 addresses. So IPv6 has been around for roughly about a decade. IPv4 for roughly give 30 or 40 years. Okay, in the late 60s, it was actually developed by the Department of Defense, or ARPANET. So IPv6, as we can see here, a much different addressing scheme, whereas IPv4 is dotted decimal, using just regular numbers that we can very easily memorize. IPv6 is all hex, so it's FE80:22:35, etc., etc. So it's not something that you're going to be able to memorize and kind of show off and say, hey, I know my IP address at home for my PC, my laptop, and my Xbox, or my PS3, or whatever, PS4, or whatever. You're not going to be able to memorize those things once we switch everything over to IPv6. However, IPv6 offers a number of advantages, such as built-in security, as I mentioned. It offers quality of service, connectivity, and routing simpler because the routers themselves won't have to have as many entries in the routing tables. You'll be able to automatically discover the neighbor addresses on a local area network. So a lot of the things that kind of take manual setup now with IP version 4 will be automatically discovered or automatically configured with IP version 6. Okay, the next internet layer protocol that I want to talk about is ICMP, or the Internet Control Message Protocol. And what this does is it provides reporting and maintenance. It allows us to test connectivity between hosts, provide error reporting, etc., etc. So there's actually a number of things that ICMP can do, some of which are echo reply and echo request, which is a ping. Okay, so packet internetwork groper. So it's basically like a sonar. We can send out a ping and we get a response back. So it's an echo request and an echo reply. So that way we can test connectivity to a device. More often than not, we can go out and say, hey, I'm going to ping a host on the ping my switch, ping my gateway, ping some other device on my network to see if I have connectivity. If routers become overloaded, they can send out what's called a source quench, or say, hey, slow down, I'm congested, slow the rate of transmission, please. Router advertisement, reply, and solicitation. So basically they can say, hey, if you have two paths available, take this path instead of the other one. Destination unreachable, again, allows some feedback to say, I can't reach or I can't connect to the device that you're trying to reach, so that destination is unreachable. So again, it's testing connectivity. With redirects, again, if we have if something's down, it can redirect communication somewhere else. And then time exceeded, basically in an IP packet, there's something called a TTL, or a time to live. So every time that packet crosses over a router or a hop, it decrements that TTL by 1 until it expires. Once that TTL has expired, it sends out an expiration and says, hey, it didn't reach the host in a specified amount of time. ICMP handles that communication. So some security considerations with ICMP. It can be used to detect the existence of a device, yes, but that's good for us, bad for the outside world, or bad for people on the outside world, I should say, because it allows them to then test connectivity of our edge devices. So they can ping our routers or ping devices on our public-facing points on the network, and they can tell that the device number 1 is there, and then they can start scanning that device and see what ports are available. So it's kind of a dual-edged sword. It allows us to do a lot of network testing and connectivity, error reporting, and so forth on the inside, but from the outside, it can also be used in malicious ways as well. So we're also vulnerable via ICMP, quote-unquote ping of death attack, and also Smurf attacks. And as we see here, just a quick example of a ping. So if I want to say ping the gateway on my network, I can say ping 10.1.10.1, and then I'll get a reply back and say, hey, yes, 4 echo requests and then 4 echo replies, letting me know that I have connectivity to that device. Okay, last on our list here of common internet layer protocols, we have ARP and reverse ARP. So address resolution protocol or reverse address resolution protocol, and it translates that address to a MAC address. Well, why does it do that? Well, because computers, again, we have a couple different layers of abstraction here. We have human-friendly names, human-friendly host names on our network, okay, PC1, PC2, etc., etc. For routing purposes, those human-friendly names or those NetBIOS names are translated to IP addresses. Okay, so computers communicate via IP address. But when we actually want to send information, it's going to do what's called an ARP, or an address resolution protocol. It will go out and ARP and say, hey, who owns this IP address? Whoever owns the IP address will say, hey, that's me, and reply back with its MAC address. And then the actual communication is sent from MAC address to a MAC address. So security considerations, there is no authentication, and it's vulnerable to ARP spoofing, also called ARP cache poisoning, and it can be used for man-in-the-middle attacks because, again, much like other attacks we've seen before, if you can poison that cache and say, hey, I know you're trying to ARP for this address, but actually go here instead, and we're able to inject a bogus or malicious address in there, we could direct traffic not to its original intended recipient, but to somewhere else. All right, and if we look here, we can see if I do an ARP-A, if I open up a command prompt and I just type ARP-A, it will show me what's in my ARP cache. And you can see 10.1.10.1 is the IP address, and then it will show me the physical address. And it's C4-04, etc., etc. So it shows me different devices that it knows about on my network, on my subnet, and then the corresponding MAC addresses. Now those things are dynamic, meaning they have a certain time to live in the ARP cache, and then after a while, they will basically fall out of the cache or be flushed. You can also physically go in and flush your ARP cache if you feel that maybe you have some bogus entries in there or something is perhaps changed, but your ARP cache hasn't updated yet. You can manually flush that ARP cache.